It happens at night, usually when everything is quiet. You finally get what you thought you wanted: more choice, more independence, more control, and instead of feeling powerful, you feel exposed. Why does freedom so often arrive dressed like anxiety? In one of the most disturbing scenes in all of modern philosophy, an old churchman looks at Christ himself and says, in essence, people do not want to be free. They want someone to relieve them of the burden of choosing. And if that sounds medieval, look around. Algorithms decide what you see. Institutions decide what you should believe. Experts, influencers, and ideologies all compete to tell you how to live. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. 16th century Seville. The air is hot, the streets are crowded, the church is powerful, feared, absolute. People whisper about heresy. Public burnings draw spectators. Faith is not private, it is political, social, total. Into this setting walks Christ, silent, recognizable not by argument but by presence. He heals, he blesses, he raises a dead child. The crowd knows him instantly, and then almost immediately he is arrested. This is the central parable inside Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov The Grand Inquisitor. It is not a side note, it is a philosophical detonation. Dostoevsky, one of the darkest and most psychologically precise writers in philosophy-adjacent literature, stages a confrontation between freedom and authority, conscience and comfort, truth and security. And then the old cardinal, the Grand Inquisitor, visits Christ in prison. He does not tremble, he does not worship, he accuses. He tells Christ that his gift of freedom was too much for humanity, too demanding, too cruel. Here is the terrifying brilliance of Dostoevsky. The Inquisitor is not a cartoon villain. He sounds reasonable, compassionate even. He believes he has corrected Christ's mistake. He believes he has saved humanity from the misery of freedom by replacing it with miracle, mystery, and authority. And that is why this story still cuts so deep, because it asks a question you cannot dismiss. What if most suffering does not come from oppression alone, but from our willingness to trade freedom away? Dostoevsky saw something that still defines modern philosophy and our age of self-improvement. People say they want liberty, but often what they really want is relief. Relief from uncertainty, relief from responsibility, relief from becoming. What he wrote next changed everything. The Inquisitor's argument begins with one of the most devastating ideas in philosophy. Human beings are not primarily seekers of truth. They are seekers of stability. And once you see that, politics, religion, media, and even self-help start to look very different. Dostoevsky puts it like this: there is nothing more seductive for man than his freedom of conscience, but there is nothing more tormenting. That line is surgical. Freedom of conscience sounds noble because it is noble. It means you cannot outsource your soul. You must decide what is right, what is worth suffering for, what kind of person you will become. But that same freedom is tormenting because every real choice closes off another life. Every act of conscience carries risk. And here's where most people get it wrong. They imagine unfreedom as chains, dictators, prisons. But in real life, unfreedom usually feels like convenience. It feels like having your opinions pre-packaged, your values inherited without examination, your schedule filled so you never have to ask whether your life means anything. This is why the Grand Inquisitor feels so modern. We live in an age of unprecedented choice, yet also unprecedented dependence. You can choose between 10,000 products and still be terrified to choose a moral principle to stand on. You can customize your coffee, your playlist, your avatar, your career path, and still have no idea who you are when no one is watching. That's not freedom. That's a simulation of freedom. And yes, that statement should make people uncomfortable, because one of the most controversial truths in modern philosophy is this: having more options does not make you more free if your desires are programmed by systems you never chose. Think about it. If you cannot tolerate solitude, can you really think independently? If you need constant approval, can you really act from conscience? If you are ruled by appetite, fear, and social pressure, are you free or merely unmanaged chaos? This is where ancient wisdom enters the conversation. Stoic philosophy asked a brutally similar question centuries earlier: what actually belongs to you? The Stoics argued that most people are slaves, not to emperors, but to passions, impulses, status, and fear. Modern Stoicism has revived that insight because people sense that inner sovereignty matters more than outward flexibility. But Dostoevsky goes even darker than Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed reason could train the self toward freedom. Dostoevsky warns that many people do not even want that training. They would rather hand over the burden entirely, and that leads to the next shock. The Inquisitor does not hate humanity because it is weak. He pities humanity because it is weak. He believes he is being merciful by removing freedom from the masses. But there's something even more shocking. The Inquisitor claims that Christ asked too much of ordinary people, too much courage, too much love, too much responsibility. And so he offers them a bargain: surrender your freedom and we will give you certainty. Surrender your conscience and we will give you belonging. Surrender your soul and we will make you comfortable. Then comes one of Dostoevsky's most famous lines: in the end they will lay their freedom at our feet and say to us, make us your slaves, but feed us. This is not just about bread. It is about the whole psychology of dependency. Feed us, yes, but also guide us, entertain us, distract us, validate us, explain the world to us, remove ambiguity, remove risk, remove the burden of becoming adults. Now let me say something debatable on purpose. Many people do not want liberation. They want a kinder cage. That is the comment section line, but it's also true, because freedom requires friction. It requires failing without a script. It requires facing guilt, confusion, temptation, loneliness. It requires saying, no institution, no ideology, no trend can live my life for me. And this is where it gets personal. You may not kneel before a church inquisitor, but maybe you kneel before productivity, before public opinion, before the need to appear certain, before the need to be liked, before the endless demand to curate a self instead of becoming one. There is a reason self-improvement often stalls right at the edge of real change. Because the next step is not another hack. It is responsibility. It is the moment you realize no book, no mentor, no philosophy channel can choose for you. This is why Dostoevsky belongs in any serious conversation about wisdom and life lessons. He understood that the deepest battle is not between good people and bad systems. It is between the part of you that wants truth and the part of you that wants anesthesia. And yet, unlike shallow motivational content, Dostoevsky offers no easy empowerment fantasy. He does not tell you freedom feels good. Often it feels terrible. Freedom means you can no longer hide inside excuses. If your life is drifting, at some point you have to admit that drift can become a decision. So what do you do with this? Start small, but start where it hurts. Pick one area where you have outsourced your conscience, your habits, your beliefs, your relationships, your use of time. Then ask, if no one could approve or disapprove, what would I choose? That question is frightening, which is exactly why it matters. Now we arrive at the core of the Grand Inquisitor's worldview. He believes human beings cannot bear the dignity of freedom. He thinks they are too weak, too frightened, too hungry for certainty. And so he builds his entire moral system on a lie told for the sake of peace. Then Dostoevsky gives us another brutal line: for the secret of man's being is not only to live, but to have something to live for. That changes the frame entirely. The problem is not merely that people fear freedom. The deeper problem is that freedom without meaning becomes unbearable. If you strip away authority, tradition, and inherited structure, but give people nothing worth sacrificing for, they will run back to the first system that offers order. This explains a lot about our age. We dismantled many old certainties. Some of that was necessary, some of it was liberation. But what rushed in to fill the vacuum? Consumption, identity performance, tribal politics, endless distraction. People do not live by critique alone. If you remove false gods and leave nothing sacred behind, new idols grow immediately. And here's the rhetorical question Dostoevsky forces on you. If someone offered you a life with less anxiety, less responsibility, and less moral uncertainty, but in exchange, you had to stop asking who you really are, would you take it? Many people already have. That is the uncomfortable truth, not through tyranny alone, but through daily surrender. Every time you choose distraction over reflection, every time you let the crowd decide your values, every time you trade integrity for belonging, freedom is rarely lost all at once. It erodes through appetite and avoidance. This is where ancient wisdom and modern Stoicism become unexpectedly relevant. Stoic philosophy teaches discipline over impulse, clarity over panic, virtue over approval. Those are not productivity tricks, they are conditions for inner freedom. They prepare you to withstand the torment of conscience without fleeing into dependence. But Dostoevsky adds something the Stoics understate. Freedom is not sustained by discipline alone. It also needs love, love of truth, love of the good, love of what is higher than comfort. Otherwise, discipline itself can become just another system of control. And then, after all the arguments, after all the accusations, Christ answers the Inquisitor with silence. No speech, no counterargument. He simply kisses the old man on his bloodless, aged lips. It is one of the most extraordinary endings in literature because it refuses the logic of domination. The Inquisitor argues that people must be ruled because they are weak. Christ responds not by overpowering him, but by affirming a freedom rooted in love. A freedom that does not coerce, a freedom that risks rejection, a freedom that believes the human soul is worth the burden. That is the revelation. Freedom is frightening because it places your life back into your hands, but it is also the only condition under which love, virtue, and meaning are real. If you are forced to be good, it is not goodness. If you are programmed to believe, it is not faith. If you never choose, you never become. So the real question is not, why do people fear freedom? The real question is, what in you still prefers chains, provided they are padded, familiar, and socially approved? Go back to that opening image. The quiet room, the late hour, the moment when freedom feels less like possibility and more like exposure. That feeling is not always a sign that something has gone wrong. Sometimes it is the exact sensation of your life becoming real. Dostoevsky's warning is not that authority is always evil or that structure has no place. Human beings need guidance, ritual, community, discipline. Even Stoic philosophy understood that. The warning is subtler and more dangerous. The moment comfort becomes more sacred than conscience, you are already negotiating away your freedom. So here is the challenge. The next 7 days, notice where you seek relief instead of truth. Notice when you ask, what do people want me to think? Instead of what do I actually believe? Notice when you hide inside busyness, entertainment, outrage, or self-improvement content because silence might force an honest answer. Then do one small act of freedom each day. Sit in silence for 10 minutes with no stimulation. Make one decision without polling anyone. Speak one truth you usually soften. Refuse one appetite that normally rules you. Choose one action because it is right, not because it is rewarded. Will that solve everything? No, but it will reveal something essential. Freedom is not a feeling granted to you by the world. It is a capacity built through responsibility, through discipline, through meaning, through the courage to remain human without surrendering your soul to the nearest system promising certainty. Most people will spend their entire lives avoiding this truth. Will you? Drop your interpretation in the comments. The best answers always come from this community, and if this shifted something in your thinking, subscribe. We go deeper every week, because the most dangerous prison is the one you beg to stay in.